How much time do you spend managing your inventory in the First Descendant? How much time do you spend farming for key resources like gold or Kuiper? Well, if you're like me, probably a lot. The good news is that there is a fix for this, but it comes with bad news. It exposes some major issues that need to be addressed by the devs in the game as soon as possible, or else. Let's find out why.
Makes it exciting!
Look, I am no stranger to grindy looter shooters. I've been struggling with stash space issues since basically 2019, the better half of this decade, and the First Descendant hits you with this age-old quality of life issue practically on day one. On the surface, it seems like a great problem to have. Your first impression may likely be that the devs are being extremely generous with their loot drops in missions and the open world activities, and if you're doing an efficient farm, you can fill your stash in under 5 minutes. Players of this genre tend to become hoarders, especially if you're into builds, and the First Descendant has a pretty cool build system with lots of moving parts. These include named ultimate weapons, mods, reactors, and external components. Then a warehouse size of materials used in the game to craft and improve on these. So where do you store all this stuff? Well, as far as gear, your bag holds 100 items. This includes weapons, reactors, and external components. Mods have their own space with a limit of 1,000. Then you have your stash. This holds another 100 slots. There's also the mailbox that gets items left behind for missions. But since it's not a two-way system, you can't really rely on it as a source of stash. So we basically have 200 slots to store our gear. So here's the problem. There are currently 19 Descendants in the game and a 20th on the way. Each Descendant will usually have 2 builds, one for mobbing or a special task, and the other for bossing. So if you have 20 Descendants, that's 40 total builds in all. You might elect to skip some Descendants because of their ultimate counterpart. For example, you can skip Glay and go for Ultimate Glay instead. And if you know you want her, by the way, that's strongly advised. You will see why. So for example, I will go for Ultimate Lepic, Viesa, Ultimate Ajax, and Glay, so that cuts my total roster down from 20 to 16 Descendants. You might not know this, but you can dismiss a Descendant. So replacing Bunny, Viesa, and Volby with their ults will drop my roster to a final total of 14 Descendants through the end of Season 1. By the way, we're in preseason right now, so we can estimate 30 total builds. This is just an estimate, so some characters might have more builds, some characters might have less. But this is fair. A single build consists of 8 gear components. Since each character will have 2 builds on average, that's 16 pieces of gear needed for each Descendant. In many cases, the same weapon might be used on more than one build and more than one Descendant, but let's just keep it simple for now. So we have 14 Descendants with 16 gear pieces each. That's 224 pieces of gear in total. Let's give the situation a strong benefit of the doubt and say each Descendant will use the same external components for each build. There's 4 external components, by the way. That is not always the case, but fine, just for this example. So this will save us 56 pieces. Now we have 168 total pieces of gear. So even then, that doesn't leave much room for new gear drops, now does it? But when you're going around doing a farm or basically any activity, you get so many drops, you can fill 100 slots in about 3 to 4 minutes. That's crazy. And when you're farming, you've probably noticed all the gear you're leaving on the ground. And if you've been playing looter shooters for a while, leaving gear behind sort of freaks you out because you know that you can crush it for resources at the very least, if not sell it. But we like to collect and sort through these for build improvements. That's what our bag inventory will serve as during the end game. It will allow us to farm for alternate builds, to explore new ways to use our Descendants' abilities, or to simply upgrade them. Don't forget there are 21 ultimate weapons. In looter shooters, it's not uncommon for players to collect them all, whether we like them or not. They're collectibles, they're sort of like trophies. That's going to eat stash space too. On top of that, you may have variations of your favorite weapons for different use cases, like one with Toxic or one with Chill as an attribute. So you see the point. Stash space is an issue. Well, the devs didn't leave us without an easy solution. You can expand your stash space.
Let's do this!
Maybe you didn't notice this option down here, but in just a few clicks, you can upgrade easily. And of course, you're going to have to pay to do so. Now, this isn't a bad thing, really. In the Division 2, we have the same issue, and everyone is always saying they would be willing to buy more space, but over there, the devs aren't willing to provide even the option. I like that we have the option here. So let's take a closer look. 100 slots would double the stash space. We need at least that. So how much is that gonna cost? 50 bucks. Wow, that hurts. That's the cost of an entire game. What does 500 slots cost us? $250. And if you max it out to the 1,000 slots, that's a whopping $500. Okay, to say it out loud, these prices are atrocious and there's no scaling benefit. They're scaling for the calibers, the premium credits, but here, this is just plain old sticker shock. It makes the Ultimate Descendant bundle costs look like a steal in comparison. That's just nuts. So if you're like me, you're saying, no way am I going to pay for this at those prices. But sadly, I'd argue it's unavoidable if you want to experience all the game has to offer. The situation will get worse as you spend more time and new descendants are introduced and as new weapons are introduced in every season. But stick around, because there is more to our space issues.
Let's do this!
Now let's look at our roster. There are 20 total descendants. We narrowed it down to 14 due to the ultimate options. When we get our ultimates, you can dismiss your basic versions, but your roster is limited to 10. Well, the devs didn't miss the opportunity to upgrade that either. You can purchase a descendant slot for 50 caliber. That's just a buck, and you're gonna need at least 4. So $4 through the course of the next season isn't that bad. But that's not my problem with this one. The problem is that this doesn't have to be here. The point of the game in many ways is to have all the descendants so you have all the tools for the possible tasks you will face. It just feels like an unnecessary tax for playing the game as intended, and you don't want players thinking that. So as you collect your descendants and ultimate weapons, you will be using them for a variety of activities: bossing, mobbing, or even stealth hacking. You might have solo builds and group play versions as well. Well, if you don't save each unique loadout you need, you will have to assemble them from scratch every time you switch in and out of that descendant. That's surely not sustainable. Luckily, the devs provided a solution for this. For descendants, there is a preset option that allows you to save their loadout. The issue is that by the end of season 1, you will have 14 descendants. These presets cap out at 6. The reality is that each descendant probably needs 2 because they will have a different setup for mobbing and bossing at the very least. And if you don't have a preset for each, you will have to reconfigure your reactors and external components at the very least. For now, I've been dealing with that part manually, but this resource, these presets, are extremely undersupplied for the player. We need at least 14 slots here. Well, you can buy more for $3 each. Doesn't sound too expensive, right? But it's a compounding issue. You see, you pay $1 for the descendant slot, and you have to spend at least $3 more to have their build. And that's the budget way of doing things too. The reality is it should cost you $6 more. So they broke up the cost into 2 pieces. You have the descendant slot and then you have their preset slot. Breaking it up does give you an option to not buy it, but let's face it, we have to. So I feel like this is more of a way of hiding the costs. These slots should be provided at a rate of 1 per descendant. They're not a luxury. They're not an optional item. You need to save your build. So they give us 6. And we will be needing 14 through season 1 at a minimum. So plan on spending $24 right there. That alone is almost the cost of a game. So I've been playing this game completely free, and I don't mind supporting a game I enjoy. But I don't feel like I should be forced on spending on things that are not supplied at a sufficient level from the get-go. Here's an example. In The Division 2, another looter shooter, you get 450 total storage space for gear. You can expand that up to 900 for free if you grind an extra 12 hours. And you only have to do that grind once. In The Descendant, you get about 200 at base. Then as you level up your mastery rank, you expand that to a total of 300. And that's it. The Division 2 provides 14 loadout slots. This game has 6, also less than half. We're not done. Weapons have loadout slots too. They have 3 at base. It costs you $2 to expand that by 1. So if you use the Thunder Cage on more than one Descendant, you're likely needing to tune your mods for each. This is where you would make that happen, and it will cost you. Also, Descendants have mod tuning loadouts too. The bad news about the system entirely, whether it's for the Descendants or the weapon, is that your invested catalysts for sockets are shared the same across all of your settings or their loadouts. But for an alternate loadout, you might prefer a different socket configuration, and that's not an option. So you can spend a catalyst to override a change, but that's not what we want to do. We want an alternate version, not to delete a version. We need a way to customize this or choose which sockets to carry over when we expand on the system. This is also a money-making opportunity for the devs, because we would be able to spend catalysts on Descendants without overriding past purchases, making it more enticing to do. But as it sits right now, I'd hesitate.
Let's do this!
So I have over 100 hours in the game for free. I was gonna spend money on a cosmetic, then felt I had to spend the money on a preset instead, because I'm adding new Descendants. And right now I'm using all of them for something, so it felt bad because it felt like the game forced my hand too early in the game and what seems like something that should have just already been there for a player. The First Descendant should have a roster that can hold at least 14 characters, 28 preset slots for their loadouts, and our weapon and Descendant expandable settings or mod loadouts should be fixed to handle different socket types. This all seems rather obvious for a game design, so why isn't it in place? So here's the deal. Free-to-play games have really transformed the gaming landscape by making it accessible to a broader audience without an upfront cost. I love this. However, the concept of developers intentionally making the game worse to sell the solution to the player base is a troubling trend, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. This practice, often seen as pay-to-win or monetization traps, can significantly damage player trust and the game's long-term success. Players quickly recognize and resent when a game is designed to frustrate them into spending money, leading to negative views, player attrition, and a tarnished reputation for the developers. For a game to thrive, it should prioritize fair and engaging gameplay while offering optional purchases that enhance the experience without making them necessary for progression or enjoyment. Early on at this stage of the game, the biggest issue I see with this is the impact it will have on quality of life of the player, especially stash space. The cost is discouraging, and I'd rather spend my money on things I'd enjoy, like cosmetics. The way it is now feels the same as buying life insurance. No one likes that, not when you can reallocate those insurance premium dollars into a sports car payment or something. So if players avoid this spend, they're gonna feel like they're spending more time in menu than in combat. They're eventually gonna tire out and then bail. That's a major issue for the developer. Worst off, it feels like the system is set to punish the game's most dedicated players. Whoa, red flag. So if you love this game, you're gonna be pumping in those hours, unlocking your Descendants, and also unlocking the quality of life issues that scale with each one. That punishing feeling of having to spend money on life insurance instead of a sports car is not something you want your dedicated fans to feel. If they love this game, they will spend. We've already seen lots of splurging in the shop on cosmetics and ultimates, but soon many will feel the disappointment of their early spend, which at the time they were happy or excited to do, but now they are forced to spend money on something that feels like it was poorly designed. And it was. It was poorly designed on purpose, so we'd spend money on it. That awesome first impression about the gear drop rate, well, I have now come to the conclusion it is all part of the monetization trap. Notice you can't see what to grab and what to avoid at a quick glance. You can't inspect or crush gear on the ground at a glance. You have to pick it up and then you can review the details. So if your stash space is always full, you don't know what you're missing. And if you don't want to spend 5 minutes of stash cleanup for every 3 minutes of gameplay, you're gonna need a bigger stash. This way of doing things teaches the player to resent the developers and to not trust them once they realize the stash space and the rate of drops are linked into a big system issue. Now, Nexon isn't evil for doing this. They're just really good at building the game on a monetization platform. It's a build for monetization first, then player experience second. This is a backwards way of doing things, and here it is in black and white. I could have bought a cosmetic, but I was forced to buy life insurance instead, and it doesn't feel great. That was a bad experience, which is why I'm making this video and had to share it with you. And sadly, I know the stash space issue looms over my head like a dark, stormy cloud. Look, I love this game so far, but this is not good. And this turns out to be the biggest pay-to-win element in the game too. Now, I don't believe the statement truly applies to PvE-only games, especially in looter shooters. There's no win you can actually buy. And buying past the grind, in my opinion, can cheat the player experience because part of getting the item was the journey, that feeling of success, and the rewarding feeling. You want to feel that the juice was worth the squeeze, but if the player wants to purchase out those feelings, there you go. And if the game doesn't feel fair and so the players are buying to circumvent that, well, that's another issue. So in the progression of the end game, the strain on mats goes from Kuiper to gold. And it's crazy how fast you can spend 10 million down to a few thousand in gold. I did it in minutes the other day. But here is the pay to win mechanic. If you expand your stash space to 1,000 slots, doing a farm, you can fill 100 slots in about 4 minutes. So in 40 minutes, you can fill 1,000 slots with junk. No matter the item, whether it's a gun, reactor, or an external component, it sells for 732 in gold at the vendor. That's roughly 732,000 in gold. That's 1.1 million in gold per hour. Alone, that might not stand out as a lot, but combined with what XP and gold farms do in the game right now, it's a big boost. Currently, the best farm in the game for gold is the Fortress farm, giving about 10 million per hour. An extra 1.1 million per hour is an 11% increase. That's a serious boost.
Let's do this!
So here's the deal. I really like this game and I want to see it thrive, but the cost to increase stash space needs to be more affordable, and we need to be able to inspect and delete gear on the ground. From there, the Descendant roster needs to grow to the equivalent of preseason Descendant availability, or 14 slots. And we need the preset space to come with them. And from there, if we're gonna pay for expanded stash space, what should that cost be? Don't miss out on your opportunity to chime in here. The devs are paying attention to social feeds, and this one really matters to the longevity of this game. So if you love this game, chime in. Thank you for hanging out with me. My name is Tuxedo Bandido. That's Tito Bandido.
One and only.
And this was another episode of The First Descendant. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss out on the fantastic experiences waiting for you in The First Descendant. And if you like videos like this, check out the one I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you want to see covered, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make everything possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be without you.
When you buy or download anything for The First Descendant, be sure to use Tux's creator code to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Follow me.
I get it.